Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to be talking about Incelcore.
Contemplations, none of us will ever know. Evil dreams and visions and mysterious waves us. Who knows where our minds can go? I feel free to hide our faces.
So some of you probably know what Incel is and what core is, and putting it together, you can probably infer what it means. But let me lay it out for you. So for like the one or two people in the back who don't know what incel means, incel stands for involuntary celibate. The best way that I can describe incel off the top of my head is somebody who feels as though that they cannot get a girl, and this is usually because of the state of the world around them, so that women are too promiscuous, that women only want super attractive men rather than intelligent ones. They tend to be characterized as people who tend to find women just overall as The definition that I could find about Incelcore is this. Incelcore, garage and or punk music written with lyrics that is based in social commentary about today's world, called its name because of the lyrics' views on women that some would associate with the incel. Some argue that the very first Incelcore song was So Need a Girl by Chris Chan. And if you don't know who Chris Chan is, sorry, but we're skipping that topic today, folks. So just from my own observations of listening to just a few of these Incelcore songs, some of the themes that are common within this genre are loneliness, depression, self-pity, feeling like you only belong within your group of incel brothers, being angry at women, lamenting about how traditional values aren't in style anymore, etc., etc. Things that you would traditionally associate with incels in general. So the name that I first heard associated with this genre of music is an artist named School Shooter. He doesn't really go by this name anymore, due to being kicked off of platforms for it for obvious reasons, and he now goes by Negative XP. Some would argue that he's normie version of Incelcore, which I'm sure that this is a genre just like any punk genre that once you get popular, you're basically a sellout or normie music or whatever. I'd say his most popular song, at least the one that I see talked about the most, is his song called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Ruined a Whole Generation of Women.
She saw Ramona Flowers and felt so empowered by a movie made in Hollywood. It said I think she's someone's daughter, like a lamb to the slaughter, but honestly I'd still hit if I could.
This song is considered controversial for multiple reasons. People consider it misogynistic, and of course I would agree it has obvious misogynistic undertones. I think the point of the song is to trigger people and its shock value. Like, yes, I believe that Negative XP believes these things about a certain group of women, but the important line of the song is this: that basically there's this sentiment of being angry at the typical alt girl for having opposite political views and being overall promiscuous, but at the end of the day, even though a incel thinks all of these things about her, they still want to hit it, and there's a frustration in that. I found a Reddit post that I will get more into a little bit down the line in this video, but someone posted this description of the song, and I think it does a really good job. Shooter lists off as many misogynistic cliches as he can about alt girls and expresses frustration and how much he still wants to fuck them. The lyrics are shockingly ugly. Shooter calls this type of person he's railing against a whole and a lamb to slaughter without humanity, whose only value is in how much she puts out. He calls the men willing to date her pedophiles, jokingly makes the reference to various conspiracy theories, and even throws a few slurs in there. Someone countered this argument by posting below and saying, "I can see the appeal of songs like this, but it's not really a great song. He's not even making an intelligent deconstruction of these types of people. He's just calling and listing a bunch of things that they all do, but there's no real substance to his attack. It's just being edgy for the sake of being edgy, and hateful for the sake of being hateful. It just sounds like some incel ranting about a type of woman he hates, all the while not really doing anything unique himself. It's not saying anything with any real bite, and personally I find it a pretty bland song musically as well." And of course, overall, you have people who criticize Incelcore music as a whole, seeing it as an appropriation of sorts of inceldom, like people who are posing as incels, basically weaponizing this going against the culture kind of like lyrics and things in order to shock people and gain popularity. Well, there are enough people that relate to this music that they even have a music festival called Virgin Fest, and the first one was this year in 2021. This is a joke on the actual Virgin Fest, which is hosted by a famous music company called Virgin. And yes, it's a joke because incels are virgins, and so they call it Virgin Fest, and you get it. Turns out in the town that they hosted it in that their local Antifa was trying to take down this whole event and threaten them not to host it. But they ended up doing it anyway and hosting it outside. And yes, of course, negative XP was there. I found one person's account of going to the music festival, and he goes by alt-right novelist on most of his social medias, and just as it sounds, he's an alt-right writer, content creator. And his video was kind of rambly and not really focused, but from his own perspective, he saw the event as very cohesive. There were people there who obviously enjoyed it, that there was a sense of community among the people who attended the concert. He says that there were more than just white people there, and that there were a few women there as well, and that there was a lot of support of negative XP, and in his own perspective, he saw the thing as very wholesome, I guess, and supportive to these people who relate to this music. As PC culture begins to gain prevalence more and more in online spaces, which I'll state right here, I'm not against being politically correct if we're respecting people and learning about diversity, so I'll just say that right here. But I'll go over some of the posts that happened on the Reddit, and we'll use this as a guideline to talk about defining counterculture and punk in the state of today's society. Oh, by the way, whenever they're talking about this track or this song, they're talking about Negative XP's Scott Pilgrim song, so just keep that in mind. The people who like this track are saying things like, this is real counterculture, and compared with the toothless punk revivalist movement, which only exists to commodify feelings had by Gen Xers who were really there with generally woke and boring bands, maybe they're right. If the fate of punk is for it to end up on Target commercials, and anything not admitted by the gatekeepers of the genre for being too ugly, justified, or not, must be countercultural. And somebody had this counter argument. I really hate how a bunch of conservatives are trying to gatekeep and say that the new counterculture is being loudly against PC values and just generally being an asshole. It may be countercultural in the technical sense, but just because it's going against the grain doesn't inherently make it better or even interesting. By that logic, killing babies is the coolest thing around because it's so countercultural. Not even the counterculture people would promote it. Punk definitely seems to be in kind of a weird place, but I don't buy this whole mindset that it can only be true punk or true counterculture if it's completely hateful and anti-PC. There's even a whole subreddit for this music genre r/incel music, and they call themselves illegal counterculture, which kind of goes into the main theme that I wanted to talk about today in regards to Incelcore. In that Reddit thread that I mentioned, there is a whole discussion about what defines punk and what defines counterculture when it's people's intentions to shock people to get them to listen to them. Well, it's not really surprising that there is a form of punk that is using alt-right aesthetics and ideas in order to form it. But really, personally, the type of punk that I want to be a part of is a part that is inclusive, because honestly, the mainstream culture and the place that PC values derive from is to amend the way that mainstream culture has marginalized certain groups, whether it's minorities, people with disabilities, and I would rather not be part of a form of punk that alienates these people. And I can already hear an incel telling me that PC culture and this form of punk alienates them, and to that I would say, I'm sorry if you've ever encountered people who have treated you this way, but once again, the form of punk culture that I want to promote is a culture where you're also included, because if we don't include you, then it's not inclusive. Now, we do have differing values on things. Like, I don't think that women being promiscuous is innately a bad thing, in which case you may not be as welcomed in some of these spaces as that. But if you're angry at people for being mad at you for solely being white and straight and able-bodied, you should be welcomed into these spaces, so long as you're respectful of other people's existence and human rights. And my take is, what's wrong with being edgy for the sake of it? It's that being edgy without any limits can perpetuate harmful narratives. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World ruined an entire generation of women. I've heard worse, but in a society that has historically put down women, and guys being like, why can't I enjoy this kind of music and these kind of sentiments about women? You're perpetuating this culture that treats women as not equal to men. And that might sound silly to you, but that's kind of how it is. As somebody who was born a woman, I can tell you that this effect definitely happens. Typically, I like to look at music of people or populations that I'm not a part of, because music helps us understand the values and thoughts of people that maybe we don't associate with hardly ever, if at all. And what I've learned from listening to some Incelcore is that I think that this new generation of incels have kind of flip-flopped what the generation of incels from my time on the internet when I was younger. They're outwardly depressed, but privately mad, whereas I grew up where they were outwardly angry and privately depressed. From what I've seen in the comments section, there's just this understanding that if you identify as an incel, you kind of have to be quiet about it, because mainstream people or normies or whatever will automatically just associate what they've understood about incels in the past and project that onto you. I mean, if you identify as an incel, yes, you probably refer to women by using slurs, and you think that women shouldn't be promiscuous, so on and so forth, complaining not getting laid. But it seems to me that there's a preservation of the community, that there are hidden pockets, and that once you find it, you have to latch onto it because it's the only place that you feel protected. At least that's my understanding of how it appears on the outside. I think there's just this underlying source of fear, yeah? So, like, as a queer person, on a mainstream sort of level, I don't feel supported, and so when I find pockets of the internet that are supportive of queer people, I stick to those places because that's where I seek support. But as an incel, these pockets are smaller and less prevalent, and so when you find them, you hunker down. You can actually speak your mind, which you can't do around normies, because only your incel brothers understand you. They understand your frustration with not getting laid. They agree that women today are sluts. They agree that we should go back to 1950s values. They agree that people fetishize diversity. Because as an incel, you're not part of that diverse population. You're a straight white male. And you're villainized oftentimes by the left and PC culture. At least that's how you perceive it. I'm not a kind of leftist who villainizes straight white men. I would say on this channel, in fact, a lot I stand up for them. While also simultaneously recognizing that you guys have privilege. I can do both at the same time. And I think that men can do that too. Because whether you want to acknowledge it or not, being born a white male, you're still benefiting from having privilege and having less social scrutiny. I know in your opinion, you face social scrutiny because you get crucified for your true opinions, yeah? There is truth to the fact that white men have privilege in our society. That's just a fact. But that doesn't mean that we're going to ignore your feeling, that your feelings aren't valid. You feel hurt, you feel alone, you feel isolated. That's a valid thing to talk about, and it's a valid thing to acknowledge. It seems that incels just want to be left alone in this echo chamber of sexism and misogyny and self-pity because it's the place that they're most comfortable. It seems that deep down they want a normal life. They want somebody who loves them. They want a family. They want that perfect life, a normal life, a typical life, but they feel so estranged from people nowadays that normal lifestyle feels unobtainable, and so they hate it, they loathe it because they can't have it. And in a way, just hold up before you make any comment, let me explain what I'm about to say. In a way, I can understand where they're coming from, but just hear me out. I often say, as somebody who is neurodivergent, that I feel like the world is designed for neurotypical people. So either people who don't have any mental health issues or are good at masking it. As somebody who's neurodivergent, I rarely feel like that I belong in this society. I don't feel like that I can function in it in a very typical manner. And so I often purposefully isolate. And I'm trying to find an alternative path to success because of it. Well, I think an incel can relate to that the world is designed by people of power, and that because they were not born as attractive or in any sort of position of power, that they are innately already at a disadvantage and reject society because of that. And they go, so fuck you. And basically I do the same thing, just for different reason and with different values. But I can kind of get the whole rejecting society thing because it just doesn't work for you. I had a friend express their concern with inceldom because it has led to violence against women in the past. And I agree with their opinion, of course. We all have heard of awful things that have happened in the name of being an incel. I predict that these things will happen less and less. I think that they understand that violence isn't the way, at least I hope that that's getting to them. And like I said, I think they're just more content to find these pockets where they feel safe, where people share their same opinions, and that they feel people understand them without insulting them. Do I think that incels need to be challenged on their values? Absolutely. So I guess those are the two topics I was covering with Incelcore. Was punk culture and also just the state of inceldom, at least how it appears from my own perspective. I'm the last person that incels would want to be talking about them. But that's too bad. I'm here talking about it because I find it interesting, so here we are. So with that being said, have you heard of Incelcore before? If so, what are your thoughts on it? Are you a fan? If you haven't heard of it before, what are your thoughts on it? And with that being said, I will sign off here and say thank you for watching. I just want to show off my makeup look here for a second. Thank you.